Okay, I'm just going to present my slide. Okay, can you see the slide in your screen?
Yes, okay.
Okay. So please try to get my attention whenever you're not hearing any audio from me. Okay, because I'm using an old headphone. Okay. So please try to um get my attention whenever you're not hearing anything. But right now you're hearing my voice, right?
Yes, okay.
Okay. Can we start now?
Yes, okay.
Okay. So for this evening, good evening everyone. For this evening, we're going to talk about disorders of the adrenal cortex. In the chapter of endocrinology and metabolism, our um, reference is still Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine, 21st edition. Okay. Let me just warn you guys, this particular chapter is very long, and besides that, it is also complicated. Okay, this is one of major topics that you need to understand very well. Okay, it is complicated because it has something to do with the positive and negative feedback mechanisms. If you're unable to understand that or those mechanisms, you won't be able to comprehend properly, okay, the normal functioning of your adrenal cortex. Again, this is one of the difficult topics that you need to, you know, be patient enough to understand. Okay. Um, there are many things in the slides that are in there. You might think that they are hard to understand, but it's actually at their in their simplest form. Okay, there are some statements here that I am not able to explain in the simpler fashion any longer. Okay, so please try to put your full attention to this topic. Okay, so let's begin for the disorders of the adrenal cortex. So this is our outline. We're going to discuss about adrenal gland and the hormones that it produces or excretes. Okay, you have your glucocorticoid, mineralocorticoid, and of course your androgen hormones. Okay, for adrenal gland disorders, there are only two um, things that you have to understand whether or not the hormones are in excess, they are elevated, or they are insufficient. These are the two basic things that you have to understand: in excess or insufficient. Okay, so either glucocorticoid excess or insufficiency, mineralocorticoid excess or insufficiency. Okay, so this is our outline. So let us first try to discuss what is the adrenal cortex. This is just a review. The adrenal cortex produces three classes of corticosteroid hormones. So you have your cortisol, aldosterone, and your DHEA, or your androgen hormones. Okay, your glucocorticoid, your mineralocorticoid, and your androgen precursors. Okay, disorders of the adrenal cortex are characterized by deficiency or excess of one or several of the three major corticosteroid classes. As I've said, it is either in excess or deficient or insufficient. Okay. So right here is a figure showing the hormones, the three classes of hormones. Okay, the mineralocorticoids, you have your aldosterone. The glucocorticoids, you have your cortisol and your androgen precursors. Okay, if you're going to notice, they all came from this precursor, this chemical, which is the cholesterol. So meaning to say, whether you like it or not, you need cholesterol in your body. Okay, it's more than you think. Okay, this particular component produces a lot of hormones that are needed in your body. Okay, so cholesterol is one very important precursors for a lot of hormones in the body. Okay, it is the precursor of your aldosterone, cortisol, your testosterone, and your progesterone. Okay, very important. So hormone deficiency can be caused by inherited glandular or enzymatic disorders, or by destruction of the pituitary or adrenal gland, by autoimmune disorders, infection, infarction, or iatrogenic events such as surgery or hormonal suppression. Okay, so in any of those mechanisms, we have to understand and we have to be able to investigate to pinpoint what is the problem. If you're able to pinpoint or identify what is the cause of the deficiency, whether or not this is autoimmune, an infection, an infarction, or iatrogenic from a surgery or hormonal suppression, that's the only time you are able to treat the hormone deficiency. Okay, on the other hand, you have your hormone excess. Okay, is my voice still clear in your end? Yes.
Yes, doctor.
Okay, hormone excess, okay, is usually the result of neoplasia, leading to increased production of adrenocorticotropic hormone, your ACTH, by the pituitary, or neuroendocrine ectopic ACTH producing cells, or increased production of glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, or adrenal androgen precursors by adrenal nodules. So you are um, going to encounter a lot of these terms, okay? Adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, okay, from the pituitary, okay? Try to remember the difference between the releasing hormone that comes from the hypothalamus and the trophic hormones that comes from the pituitary. You have to understand that this particular chapter requires you to understand the basic um, neuroendocrinologic process from the hypothalamus going to your pituitary and targets the organs, okay? The adrenal organs in this context, okay? So hormone excess is usually from neoplasia. Hormone excess is usually from tumors. Tumors from where they could be from the pituitary, okay? Or they can be ectopic, okay? Outside your HPA axis, outside your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Okay. So that is for your deficiency and excess. Okay. The normal adrenal gland weighs about 6 to 11 grams each. They are located above the kidneys and have their own blood supply. Okay. I hope you can still remember your adrenal gland. They are located above each kidney. So you have two adrenal glands. Arterial blood flows initially to the subcapsular region and then enters from the outer cortical zona glomerulosa through the intermediate zona fasciculata to the inner zona reticularis and eventually to the adrenal medulla. The right suprarenal vein drains directly to the vena cava, while the left suprarenal vein drains into the left renal vein. So this is just a simple recall of your anatomy. Again, this is the transverse section of your adrenal gland, the adrenal gland located above your kidneys. So right here is the capsule, the cortex, and the medulla. Okay, in a microscopic view of the cut section of this gland, you have again the capsule and the cortex. The cortex is subdivided into three main zones. You have your zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and zona reticularis. And the innermost part is the medulla. Okay, again, these are your adrenal glands. They are located above each kidneys. They are like caps, okay? Head caps, okay? So the vein draining for the right is actually directed to the inferior vena cava. However, the vein draining the left adrenal gland drains to the renal vein first, okay? Regulatory control of the steroidogenesis. Okay, production of glucocorticoids and adrenal androgens is under the control of your HPA axis. As I've said a while ago, remember the normal process of your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Hypothalamus releasing the or excreting the releasing hormones, and your pituitary gland produces the trophic hormones directed to the target organ, which is the adrenal. Releasing hormones, trophic hormones, and the adrenal hormones. Okay. So for the glucocorticoids and the adrenal glands, it is under the control of your HPA axis. That is very different from your mineralocorticoids, which is actually regulated by your RAAS or your renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. This is one very important thing to note. Okay, because disorders from your HPA most likely will um, disrupt the production of glucocorticoid and adrenal androgens, but not directly the mineralocorticoid, because mineralocorticoid is somehow regulated by your RAAS. Okay, so remember that, very important. So again, here is a figure showing your hypothalamus, your anterior and posterior pituitary, and the target organ, which is in this tonight's lesson is our adrenal cortex. So from your hypothalamus, it releases the releasing hormone. For this case, it is the corticotropin releasing hormone. And from the anterior pituitary gland, the CRH acts on the anterior pituitary gland, producing the trophic hormone, adrenocorticotrophic hormone. And this ACTH will now act on the target organ. For example, on the zona fasciculata, which produces your glucocorticoid or the cortisol. The cortisol now will be released into the systemic circulation. And if it reaches the desired amount in the systemic circulation, it will give a negative feedback. Okay, meaning to say it will give signal to the anterior pituitary and also for the hypothalamus that wait, do not release CRH, do not release ACTH, because there is already too much of the cortisol. That's the negative feedback. If that particular feedback is disrupted and is not functioning well, the hypothalamus will keep on releasing CRH. The anterior pituitary gland will keep on releasing ACTH. Thereby, from the elevated cortisol, it will keep on elevating even more. Okay, so that's the mechanism that you have to understand, the negative feedback and the regulatory control of your HPA axis. Okay, so again, for your HPA, the production of glucocorticoid and your adrenal androgen is controlled by your HPA. However, for the mineralocorticoid, it is regulated by your RAAS. Okay, what is your RAAS again? Renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, RAAS. Okay, so again, the liver creates angiotensinogen. The kidney releases renin and converts angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. Okay. And then the lungs produces the ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme released from the lungs, and from angiotensin 2, it converts to angiotensin 2, or 1, it converts to angiotensin 2. The angiotensin 2 can actually directly act on the blood vessels, stimulating vasoconstriction. Okay, when you have a state of hypotension in cases of a drop in blood pressure or a drop in fluid volume, this is activated, causing vasoconstriction to regulate the blood pressure. On the other hand, your angiotensin 2 can also act directly to your adrenal glands to stimulate the release of the aldosterone from your zona glomerulosa. Okay, this aldosterone will act on the kidney to reabsorb sodium. And sodium, okay, will actually um, um, try to reabsorb water. Okay, where sodium goes, water follows. Okay, remember that dictum. Okay, so you will have a lot of fluids then in the body, increasing further or regulating further the blood pressure. Okay, this is in reaction from the initial state of hypotension or fluid loss. Your body will activate the RAAS system, renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. So the mineralocorticoid or the aldosterone hormone is regulated by the RAAS system, not the HPA axis. Okay, that is what I'm telling you. Okay. Steroid hormone synthesis, metabolism, and action. ACTH stimulation is required for the initiation of steroidogenesis. Okay, where does ACTH comes from again? It comes from your anterior pituitary gland. Okay, you need this trophic hormone to release the hormones from the target organ. Okay, so adrenal steroidogenesis, genesis means creation, okay, occurs in the zone specific fashion, okay, with mineralocorticoid synthesizing occurring in the outer zona glomerulosa, okay, glucocorticoid from your fasciculata, and your androgen from the reticularis. Okay, so remember that. Again, let's review. For your zona glomerulosa, the hormone release is the mineralocorticoid. Example is your aldosterone. For your zona fasciculata, it releases glucocorticoids such as your cortisol or cortisone in its inactive form. Okay. Zona reticularis, it releases androgens that stimulate masculinity. Okay, the medulla actually releases your stress hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine, but we're not going to discuss that. We're just right here. Okay, so glomerulosa, fasciculata, reticularis, aldosterone, cortisol, and androgens. So remember those, very important. So let's now first discuss Cushing's syndrome. Okay, so we are discussing the excessive states first. Okay, and then we'll go to the deficient or insufficient states later. Okay, so first, what is Cushing's syndrome? a chronic exposure to excess glucocorticoids of any etiology. So you have to understand the difference between Cushing's syndrome and Cushing's disease. When I say Cushing's disease, okay, the glucocorticoid production is being dependent from the pituitary adenoma or the HPA axis. When we say Cushing syndrome, that includes the pituitary adenoma and some other ectopic sources, such as tumors outside your HPA axis. Okay, so Cushing syndrome covers all of that. Cushing's disease is much more specific. Okay, so the disorder can be ACTH dependent or independent. When we say ACTH dependent, okay, the release of the cortisol is dependent on the release of the ACTH. Okay, so like for example, pituitary adenoma, one very classic example of ACTH dependent. So meaning to say the cortisol will be released depending on the amount of ACTH released by the pituitary adenoma. Okay, so that is the reason why it's called dependent. Okay, when the pituitary adenoma is not excreting any ACTH, then you won't have any increase in the cortisol. Okay, and not only pituitary adenoma, there are others that are non-pituitary tumors or ectopic secretions. Ectopic secretions, any tumors outside your HPA axis, such as your pancreatic tumor, most of the time, it's from the lung tumor, adenocarcinoma, and even for your medullary thyroid cancers. Okay, they are able to excrete ACTH. Those are ectopic sources, meaning to say the ACTH did not come from its original source, which is your pituitary gland. Okay, that's why it's called ACTH dependent or ectopic secretion. However, on the other hand, ACTH independent, okay, just think of tumors that are not dependent on the pituitary, but rather tumors on the gland in itself. The gland in itself has its own capability to produce cortisol without even the signal coming from the ACTH. That's why it's called ACTH independent. Okay. What else? As well as iatrogenic. Okay. Iatrogenic, like administration of exogenous glucocorticoids. Okay. Exogenous glucocorticoids. You are giving an outer source of your cortisol. Okay, administration of steroids. Okay, those are ACTH independent. So again, ACTH dependent, you have your pituitary adenoma, ectopic ACTH, you have your lung cancers, pancreatic tumors, thyroid cancers. Okay, ACTH independent, these are adenomas in the adrenal gland itself. Okay. The term Cushing's disease refers specifically to Cushing's syndrome caused by the pituitary corticotrope adenoma. So again, this is a more specific subtype of Cushing's syndrome, which is Cushing's disease. So when I say Cushing's disease, the elevation of the cortisol is triggered by the ACTH coming directly from the pituitary gland in itself. Pituitary adenoma. Okay, so let's try to take a look at the epidemiology. This Cushing syndrome is generally considered a rare disease. However, it is debated whether mild cortisol excess may be more prevalent among patients with features of Cushing, such as centripetal obesity, type 2 diabetes, or osteoporotic vertebral factors. Okay. The overwhelming majority of patients with endogenous Cushing syndrome, the underlying cause of an ACTH producing adenoma of the pituitary is initially described by Harvey Cushing, okay, in 1912, okay? Cushing's disease more frequently affects women with the exception of prepubertal cases where it is more common in boys, okay? So again, here is a female to male ratio. Either of the two, whether ACTH dependent or ACTH independent, females are more prevalent to acquire Cushing's syndrome. However, the prevalence rate between ACTH dependent and ACTH independent, the ACTH dependent is actually higher. This is more common rather than this one, from 90% versus 10%. Okay. The overall, however, the medical use of glucocorticoids for immunosuppression or for the treatment of inflammatory disorders is the most common cause of Cushing's syndrome, also termed iatrogenic Cushing's. This particular slide just says is saying to us that it's not actually the tumors in themselves that are the main culprit, okay, the most common cause. It's actually surprisingly, okay, surprisingly from an exogenous source. Okay, giving some steroids to your patient is actually triggering a lot of cortisol production in the body. Surprisingly, that is one more common cause than other causes such as your adenomas. Okay, so be very careful in the future when you're going to give steroids to your patients. Okay, it can actually cause elevated glucocorticoids, predisposing your patient to Cushing's syndrome. Okay. So there are other terminologies that you have to understand, such as microadenoma and macroadenoma. So here are the sizes. Okay, so if it's more than 1 centimeter, that's macroadenoma. Okay, ectopic ACTH production, meaning to say it is the ACTH comes from other um chemicals or other tumors other than the pituitary adenoma in itself. So carcinoid tumors in the lungs, in the thyroid, and even in the pancreas can actually produce ectopic ACTH production. Okay. So what are the clinical manifestations? Okay. Steroids or glucocorticoids affect almost all cells of the body. The signs of cortisol excess impact multiple physiologic symptoms or systems with upregulation of gluconeogenesis, lipolysis, and protein catabolism. Okay, so your patient is actually um, prone to hypertension, prone to metabolic syndromes. Okay. Excess glucocorticoids also interfere with central regulatory, leading to suppression of gonadotropins, to hypogonadism, amenorrhea, and other decreased hormones such as your TSH. So excess cortisol can actually decrease other hormones, okay, such as your TSH and other reproductive hormones, causing hypogonadism and amenorrhea. So this is very problematic. Cortisol or glucocorticoid excess can actually affect almost every hormone in the body, which is very dangerous, okay? What else? Clinical signs and symptoms include obesity, diabetes, diastolic hypertension, hirsutism, and even depression. Okay, so these are the things that you have to ask to your patient. Okay. A diagnosis of Cushing's should be considered when several clinical features are found in the same patient, in particular with more specific features found or manifest at an unusual age like osteoporosis in the young. Okay, so basically we usually see typical osteoporosis in elderly population, not in the young. When you have unusual, okay, not so typical, okay, presentations of these kinds, okay, try to investigate for hormonal disturbances. What else? What other distinct features? You have fragility of the skin, easy bruisability, striae, purplish striae, myopathy. Okay, these are some of the things that you have to note. Okay, what else? Okay, hyperpigmentation of knuckles, scars, or skin areas exposed to friction. Okay, so this is one classic example of a person with Cushing's syndrome. Okay, you have your buffalo humps or your fat pads, red cheeks, abdominal stretch marks, easy bruisability, pedunculous abdomen, okay, central obesity with thin arms and thin legs, okay? So central obesity. This is one classic appearance of people with Cushing's syndrome. Okay, so just try to read on this table. Okay, body fat, skin, bone, and muscles. Cardiovascular, they are prone to hypertension. So generally, they are leading into a lot of comorbidities. When you have excessive cortisol, there are a lot of comorbidities that you could be at risk of. Okay. Classically, your metabolic syndrome. Okay. So again, here are the clinical features. Cushing syndrome can be acutely endangered by deep vein thrombosis or cardiovascular complications, and also they are prone to psychiatric symptoms such as anxiety and depression. Okay, some some actually has acute paranoia and even to the point of psychosis, surprisingly. Okay, so how do you diagnose? The most important first step in the management of Cushing syndrome is to establish correct diagnosis, because most mistakes may lead to unnecessary investigations. Okay. The diagnosis of Cushing's can be considered as established if the results of several tests are consistently subjective of Cushing's. So you can have these tests. One is an increased 24-hour urinary free cortisol. The other one is the dexamethasone suppression test. Just remember these two. 24-hour urine-free cortisol and your dexamethasone. There are other tests, but these two are the most important ones in the hospital practice. Okay, so you have here a figure or an algorithm that will help you identify and investigate for a Cushing's syndrome. So let's try to take a look. Can you see this? Can you read it? Can you read it in your screen? Is it visible? Yes.
Yes, doctor.
All right. So you have here the signs and symptoms of Cushing syndrome: central obesity, proximal myopathy, striae, amenorrhea, hirsutism, impaired glucose intolerance, or let's just say diabetes, okay? Hypertension and osteoporosis, okay? Especially osteoporosis in the young, that is not so typical. So try to suspect a patient with these clinical manifestations of having Cushing's syndrome. So what will you do? You screen them or confirm the diagnosis by requesting for 24-hour urine-free cortisol test. Okay, an elevated twice the normal range will give you a positive result. Another one famous test is your dexamethasone overnight test. Okay, wherein you're going to give 1 milligram of dexamethasone at 11 p.m. That's why it's called overnight test. Okay, and the result will be an unsuppressed cortisol at around 8 to 9 a.m. in the next morning. Okay, the cortisol, instead of it being suppressed, it stays very elevated. Okay, so those are the things. Another screening is your midnight salivary cortisol. Okay, but these two are more frequently used, your urinary free cortisol and your dexamethasone overnight test. Others will use low dose and high dose dexamethasone. So if it turns out negative, then try to observe your patient. If it turns out to be positive, you have two differential diagnoses ahead of you. Is it ACTH dependent or ACTH independent? Because there are different causes of these as we have discussed in the table. So how will you know? Simply test for the level of your plasma ACTH. If it's really high or normal, then it is ACTH dependent. If it is low, it's independent. If it is high, okay, ACTH independent, again, what are the things that you're going to consider? Okay, you have your pituitary adenoma. That's why you're requesting for an MRI. Okay, other tests would include your CRH test. Okay, so if it turns out to be equivocal or normal, it is Cushing's disease. Okay, meaning to say there is really pituitary adenoma, and the treatment for that is surgery through transsphenoidal. Okay, meaning to say they will try to go through the nostrils of the patient. Okay, transsphenoidal pituitary surgery. Okay, if it is negative, okay, it must be ectopic ACTH. Meaning to say ectopic, it is outside of your HPA axis, your hypothalamic pituitary axis. So the tumors can be located anywhere else besides that. Like for example, your pituitary, or I'm sorry, pancreatic tumors, lung carcinomas, thyroid carcinomas. Okay, that's why it's called ectopic. Okay, ectopic tumors that are also capable of producing ACTH. So this is the side where you consider ACTH independent. But if you have a decreased plasma ACTH, it is more likely than not ACTH independent. So just try to investigate the adrenal glands themselves, okay, by way of requesting CT scan, as simple as that. Okay, so when you identify unilateral or bilateral micro nodules or macronodules, they are subject for operation, adrenalectomy. Okay, so this side is much simpler than this, but you have to be able to familiarize with yourselves with the flow of the algorithm. Okay. So I've discussed this already, dexamethasone suppression test. Okay. Again, MRI and CT scan. MRI for pituitary adenoma, CT scan for your adrenal tumors themselves. Okay. So how do you treat? Okay. So I've mentioned that a while ago, surgery, either transsphenoidal if it is pituitary adenoma, if it is ectopic ACTH, you treat the cancer from other organ system. If it is cancer from the thyroid, lungs, or pancreas, you treat them respectively. Okay. Or if it is coming from, or if it is a tumor in the adrenal gland, okay, adrenalectomy. Okay, those are the treatments. Okay. Others will include radiotherapy, okay, radiosurgery, okay. If the tumors are very large that they cannot be operated on initially by surgery, they have to underwent radiotherapy or radiosurgery first, okay, to diminish or decrease the size of the tumor, okay. In some patients with very severe overt Cushing's, like difficult to control hypokalemic hypertension or acute psychosis, it may be necessary to induce medical therapy to rapidly control the cortisol excess during the period leading up to surgery, which also can help to alleviate hypercoagulability and thus operative risk. Okay, if the procedure is going to wait and there are other metabolic problems that already being exaggerated by the cortisol or by the Cushing syndrome, you have to control that. You have to start medical therapy directed to the particular problem, whether it's hypertension, whether it's increased sugar, dyslipidemia, and all that. Okay, because as we have said, the Cushing syndrome actually have a lot of metabolic disorders. Okay, so while waiting for the surgery, control those medical problems. Okay, so one of the particular suggestion for treatment while waiting for the surgery is of course giving oral medications such as your metyrapone and ketoconazole. Just remember these two, metyrapone and ketoconazole. Okay, you have other medications such as these oscillodrostat and mitotane, okay? But more likely than not, you will encounter metyrapone or ketoconazole, okay? Others will include etomidate and pasireotide, okay? After the successful removal of the ACTH or cortisol producing tumor, the HPA axis will remain suppressed. Of course, you have already removed the tumor that is causing the excess cortisol. What is now your next step? Of course, you don't have any hormone now. So what are you going to do is to replace the missing hormone because you've actually removed the gland now or removed the tumor now. So during the recovery, okay, slow recovery, try to replace the hormone by giving steroids such as your hydrocortisone and try to assess and evaluate your patient properly. Okay. All right. Okay. So that's it for your glucocorticoid excess. Okay. Right now, we're going to the next part, which is your mineralocorticoid excess. Okay. A while back, we've discussed cortisol, glucocorticoid excess. And now we're going to talk about mineralocorticoid or aldosterone excess. Okay. It is also known as Conn's syndrome. Okay, for all you know, for all we know, this particular problem produces a lot of aldosterone. Okay, that is a primary cause of hypertension most of the time. Okay. The most common cause of mineralocorticoid excess is primary aldosteronism, reflecting excess production of aldosterone by the adrenal zona glomerulosa. So there is the problem in the zone itself. Okay, so there could be some form of hyperplasia or tumors such as adenoma in the adrenal gland itself, causing an excessive production of mineralocorticoid or aldosterone. Okay, so here is a table that enumerates the causes of mineralocorticoid mineralocorticoid, you have your primary aldosteronism and you have your secondary or other causes. So one very common cause of primary aldosteronism is, of course, a tumor in the adrenal gland themselves. We call that Conn's syndrome or Conn's disease. Okay. Others could be coming from Cushing syndrome and other carcinoma. Okay, just remember that. Carcinomas should be considered tumors. Okay. Manifestation of excessive mineralocorticoid excess is, remember, hypokalemic hypertension. This is one particular characteristic of mineralocorticoid excess. Okay, how does it arrive here is because try to remember your zona glomerulosa is producing a lot of aldosterone. Aldosterone acts on the what? The kidney to reabsorb sodium. Along with sodium, you excrete potassium, and then you also try to reabsorb the fluids or the water, giving rise to hypokalemic hypertension. That's why. Okay, so meaning to say you have to understand the normal mechanism of aldosterone and try to exaggerate that. Try to exaggerate that. Okay, that's when you going to come up with hypertension and hypokalemia. Okay, so what are the clinical manifestations? Of course, expansion of extracellular and plasma volume. So what will you have? Okay, so you can have edema, you can have hypertension, fluid overload. Okay, and when you have long-standing hypertension, you expect for what? And organ damage such as heart failure, cardiomyopathies, and even acute kidney injury. Okay. The clinical hallmark of mineralocorticoid is in excess is hypokalemic hypertension. I've explained that a while ago. Okay, you can also test for magnesium. Whenever you have low potassium, you always check for magnesium. Okay, so be very careful when giving thiazide because it can exacerbate hypokalemia. What are your thiazide drugs? Okay, one classic example is your hydrochlorothiazide. Okay, so if you have a good electrolytes with your patient, normal sodium, especially normal potassium, then you are free to give hydrochlorothiazide. But when you are actually considering Conn syndrome, hypokalemic states, do not give thiazides. Okay, remember that. Okay. Severe hypokalemia, what is the clinical manifestation when you have a very, very, very low potassium? Okay, so you could have weakness, you could have paralysis, okay, severe alkalosis, cramps, okay, and tetany, okay, sometimes fatal arrhythmia, okay. Majority of the time, primary aldosteronism increase rates of osteoporosis and type 2 diabetes. Okay. So how do you diagnose? Okay. So it's not currently recommended for all patients with hypertension. Okay. So it's not like when your patient is hypertensive, you go on about screening your patient for mineralocorticoid. No, do not do that. Okay. So you have to weigh in if it's really indicated to screen for mineralocorticoid. Okay. Usually, those who exhibit hypertension associated with drug resistance, meaning to say you're already giving 2 or 3 or more than 3 cocktail of antihypertensive drugs and your patient remained hypertension. Okay, so try to evaluate for Conn's syndrome. Okay, what else? Hypokalemia, adrenal mass. Okay, when you encounter ultrasounds with adrenal mass, okay, try to investigate for possible excessive aldosterone. Okay. So here is a figure showing how to manage your excessive mineralocorticoid. First, try to screen. So what are your clinical manifestations of mineralocorticoid? Severe hypotension and hypokalemia. Okay, so how do you screen? They usually use the ARR, aldosterone renin ratio. As I have said a while ago, your mineralocorticoid is regulated by your RAAS. It's not regulated by your HPA axis. Your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis regulates the other two remaining hormones, which are your glucocorticoids and your androgen hormones. But for your aldosterone, for your mineralocorticoid, remember your RAAS. So the screening is also directed to the RAAS, RAAA system. So the screening is through the measurement of your aldosterone renin ratio. If it's turned out to be negative, then try to observe. When it's positive, then try to confirm, okay? Or start your treatment, okay? So here are the treatments and some other laboratory or diagnostic tests. You don't need to memorize all the flow. Just take note some of the data up until here, okay? And try to understand the flow, okay? It needs a strong mind to analyze these figures, okay? Thus, for practical purposes, in the first instance, the patient can remain on the unusual antihypertensives. Try to skip that, okay? Okay. All right, let's move to the last part of the chapter, which is adrenal insufficiency. So a while ago, we've discussed glucocorticoid excess and mineralocorticoid excess. So right now, we'll try to discuss about adrenal insufficiency, meaning to say the opposite, glucocorticoid insufficiency and mineralocorticoid insufficiency. All right. So the etiology, primary adrenal insufficiency, is most commonly caused by autoimmune adrenalitis. Okay, very important. Okay, autoimmune. So here are some of the primary causes of adrenal insufficiency. Okay, so first you have your autoimmunity. Autoimmunity. Okay, don't need to memorize all of these. Just try to make sure you understand that this is caused primarily by autoimmunity. Okay. Oh, okay. Secondary or central adrenal insufficiency is a consequence of dysfunction of your hypothalamic pituitary component axis. Okay, so primary adrenal insufficiency, the problem is at the primary level, which is the adrenal gland in itself. When you say secondary, you go up in the axis. It is either the pituitary or tertiary, it is the hypothalamic. There's a problem at the higher centers, either the pituitary or the hypothalamic. As you go up, it becomes secondary or tertiary cause. Okay. Excluding iatrogenic suppression, the overwhelming majority of cases are caused by pituitary or hypothalamic tumors. or their treatment by surgery or irradiation. So it's either a tumor or some other forms of causes such as radiation and iatrogenic procedures such as surgery. Okay. So here are the causes of secondary adrenal insufficiency, something to do with the higher center, the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. So again, of course, pituitary tumor. So if we will try to understand the pituitary adenomas or pituitary tumors can actually cause glucocorticoid excess or adrenal insufficiency like glucocorticoid insufficiency. So for you to have a pituitary hormone, you have to know if it is manifesting in a excessive state or in a insufficient state. You have to establish that, okay? Because pituitary tumors can actually produce both conditions. Okay, remember that. So what are the clinical manifestations of Addison's disease since it is both characterized by glucocorticoid loss or mineralocorticoid loss? Okay, so let's try. If it is glucocorticoid deficiency, remember adrenal insufficiency will compose of still the three class of hormones, cortisol, your aldosterone, and androgen. Just try to focus on each of the normal functioning of cortisol, normal process or functioning of aldosterone and the androgen, you will be able to understand these insufficiencies when you are able to understand the normal functioning of these hormones. So when you have glucocorticoid deficiencies, you have these signs and symptoms. When you have the aldosterone deficiency, you will have these signs and symptoms. When you have the androgen deficiency, you will have these signs and symptoms. Okay, so this table is a very important table because this is going to be part of your history taking. When you encounter a patient suspicious to have Conn's disease or adrenal insufficiency, you would want to ask these signs and symptoms if they are present to your patient. Okay. Okay, these are all in the table, the clinical manifestations. Okay, for example, clinical features of mineral or Addison's disease, adrenal insufficiency. So you have your hyperpigmentation, your palmar creases, and your dorsal foot hyperpigmentation, as well as your nipples and axillary regions. What else? Hyperpigmentation for there's a patchy hyperpigmentation on the oral mucosa. Okay, so these are all clinical manifestations when you have insufficient adrenal hormones. Okay, they also manifest with hyponatremia and what else? Okay, hyponatremia. Initially, it's hyper kalemia, but most of the time, the characteristic feature for adrenal insufficiency is hyponatremia. Why again? Just think of your aldosterone. Aldosterone in itself reabsorbs sodium, so when you have adrenal insufficiency, you don't have mineralocorticoid hormones or your aldosterone. Okay, you're going to excrete a lot of sodium in the body, causing your body to have hyponatremia. Okay, as simple as that. So the difficulty in this chapter is is really that if you don't understand the primary normal mechanism, if you're able to understand the primary normal mechanism of your HPA, hypothalamus pituitary axis, and the target organs and their hormones secreted with the positive and the negative feedback regulation, if you fail to understand that, then this chapter will be very, very difficult for you to understand. So try to go back to the normal because we are discussing what is already abnormal. Okay? So I hope you're still following. Okay. Acute adrenal insufficiency, also termed adrenal crisis, okay, usually occurs after prolonged period of non-specific complaints. Okay. Postural hypotension that may progress to hypovolemic shock. Okay. Abdominal tenderness, nausea, vomiting, and fever. So we don't want that our patient will go into hypovolemic shock. That's very dangerous because your patient doesn't have any cortisol, doesn't have any steroid, doesn't have any aldosterone. Okay, your patient is very weak, fatigued, vomiting, nauseated, with tenderness of the abdomen and possibility of hypotension that we are not really or we are trying to prevent to go into hypovolemic shock, which is very, very dangerous. Okay. The primary presentation may resemble neurologic disease with decreased responsiveness, progressing to stupor and coma. You might misdiagnose this as a stroke because of the change in sensorium, change in the orientation. Your patient might be that weak and fatigued that his responsiveness is really decreased, diminished, progressing to stupor, and coma, which is very dangerous. Adrenal crisis can be triggered by intercurrent illness, surgical, or other stress. Okay. So this is a crisis. Okay. So you have to be aggressive when your patient is actually non-responsive or with changes in sensorium. So how do you diagnose? They usually use the cosyntropin test. Cosyntropin test. For your cortisol excess, your Cushing syndrome, again, what are those tests? You have your 24-hour urine free cortisol level and your dexamethasone overnight test. So remember those. Okay. For your adrenal insufficiency, it's your cosyntropin test. Okay. So again, this figure will show the flow chart of how to diagnose and briefly discuss the management or the treatment. So suspicion for adrenal insufficiency, you have your weight loss, fatigue, hypotension, hyperpigmentation, hyponatremia, changes in sensorium, okay, confusion, stuporous, okay? So the screening is your cosyntropin tests, okay? So what are your differential diagnosis? You have to establish if this or you have to establish what are the hormones that are insufficient. Is it the glucocorticoid hormone? You have no cortisol. Is it mineralocorticoid deficiency? You have no aldosterone. Okay, so you have to identify that. Okay, and then right there from there, you will now be able to request for antibodies or direct MRI. Okay, so basically, you just need to familiarize yourself with these top levels. Okay, very important. So how do you treat acute adrenal insufficiency or adrenal crisis? Okay, your patient is going into hypotension, hypovolemic shock. So you have to initiate immediate rehydration. Okay, saline infusion with the rate of 1 liter per hour. That's very fast. Okay, and continuous cardiac monitoring. Why? because hyponatremia, or hyperkalemia can actually cause fatal arrhythmia. And then try to replace, since you don't have any steroid hormones in your body, give an exogenous source, glucocorticoid replacement by way of giving hydrocortisone. Okay, so that's how you immediately respond to adrenal crisis. Okay. Okay. So here are some other examples of your steroids or fludrocortisone. The adequacy of treatment can be evaluated by measuring the blood pressure, sitting and standing. That is, you are checking if there is still presence of orthostatic hypotension, okay, or postural hypotension. So you have to evaluate that. Take the blood pressure at the sitting and standing position. Okay. In addition to that, since the aldosterone is involved for adrenal insufficiency, you have to request for the electrolytes, the sodium, potassium. Okay. So replacement strategies, you don't have any steroids, you don't have any aldosterone, try to give replacements. Okay. So DHEA, you can give those adrenal androgen replacement if the androgen hormones are the identified hormones that are insufficient. You can give your DHEA. If your glucocorticoid is the one that is insufficient, you give hydrocortisone steroids, as well as for your mineralocorticoid deficiency. Okay, but for your androgen, it's your DHEA. Okay, all right. So that's the end of our lesson for tonight. Okay, so again, let me remind everyone, if you're unable to understand the chapter for tonight, you have to go back to the HPA axis, the normal secretion and functioning of your hypothalamus, releasing the releasing hormones, going to the pituitary, anterior pituitary, and then acting with your target organ by releasing the trophic hormones, your ACTH, and then the adrenal glands. Focus on the adrenal glands, okay? Your zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and your zona reticularis, okay? Respectively, they are producing glucocorticoids, cortisol, mineralocorticoids, your aldosterone, and your androgen hormones. Try to understand the negative feedback, how it works. Okay, by understanding what is normal, it will be easier for you to understand this chapter. Okay, and of course, familiarize yourselves with some clinical features that are typical and are common to these excessive cortisol, excessive aldosterone, or the opposite, insufficiency. Familiarize yourselves with these signs and symptoms. And lastly, for their diagnostic screening, okay? What are the diagnostic screening tests that you have to request, okay? For the treatment, not so much for the treatment, but I require you guys to know the signs and symptoms, understand the pathophysiology, understand what is normal, and understand what is the abnormal, and then some major screening tests. Okay, you don't need to memorize the treatment procedures. That's not for your level at this point in time. Okay, you just have to focus on the etiology, pathophysiology, clinical manifestations, and how to diagnose or screen for these disorders. So again, This is one of the complicated parts in endocrinology. So for you to understand that, still go back to the basics. Understand what is the normal. Okay, so try to read and try to watch some of the videos in the internet if you can, okay, to simplify your understanding for your HPA axis, hypothalamic, pituitary, and adrenal axis, okay? You won't get lost from all these disorders if you understand the flow of the normal secretion with the positive and the negative feedbacks. All right. Okay, so that's it for tonight, guys. Are there any questions? Do you have any questions? Adrenal disorders. None?
No, doctor.
None? None. Okay. So if you want to reread and review, this is still found in the 21st edition of the Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine. Just try to move to the endocrine chapter. This is very, very long. Okay, very, very long chapter. Okay. So if there are no more questions, I hope you learned something for tonight. Okay, encourage you guys to understand these hormones because they are very common and they are very vital to basic metabolism and the life of your patients. All right. Okay, so if there are no more questions, thank you for listening and thank you for having your time. And good evening, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, doctor.